Amazing. Thank you for joining, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Hope you're having a great day so far. My name is Hannah. I use she, her pronouns, and I lead email and community at Growclass. So you all probably know me. You've probably seen me in your inbox before. If not, hello, it is nice to meet you. If you're not familiar with Growclass, we are a community-first education platform filled with marketers, founders, and freelancers. We teach folks the skills they need to grow their careers and their businesses. So today, I am very excited to learn more about community building through thought leadership with Daniel Francavilla. Daniel is a marketing advisor, strategist, serial founder, and a mentor for making a positive impact. He is a certified brand strategist, a professor at OCAD University, and a member of the Canadian Marketing Association and RGD. He's also a recipient of the 40 Under 40 Award. Just got all the great things on your bio there, Daniel. Super proud of that. I hope you are, 'cause that's amazing. He works with founders, leaders, and their teams on branding, storytelling, and more to meet their goals. So his latest venture, the Good Growth Company, provides training for social good organizations to upskill their teams and to scale their mission. So I'm going to drop all of Daniel's links in the chat for you. If you want to connect with him, you can find him at a few of these places. If you have any questions, we will have some time at the end for a bit of Q&A. You can feel free to unmute yourself or drop your questions in the chat. And if you're feeling a little bit shy, you can send me a private message and I'll ask the question on your behalf. A reminder, there's no such thing as a dumb question. We're all here to learn, and this is a judgment-free zone. So we just ask that you keep it kind and respectful in the chat. And if you need a little reminder of what that looks like, I'm going to share our community guidelines for the shared space. Failure to adhere to these guidelines can result in your removal from the call or expulsion from the community. But we're all friends here today, so I am not worried about anyone at all. And with that being said, I'm going to pass the mic over to Daniel so we can learn more about community building through thought leadership. Thank you for being here with us today, Daniel.
All right, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Personally, I've enjoyed my time with the Grow Class community, although I haven't actually done Grow Class myself. My wife recently completed the program. So today we're going to talk about community building through thought leadership. I actually just need to fix my sharing, even though we were ready so early. Um, I lost my speaker notes, which are very important to make sure that I stay on time. So give me 2 seconds as I put that back up. And hopefully, again, we will have time for some questions. But if not, I'm also happy to connect with you through social. So thank you so much, Hannah, for putting all my information in there. All right. So I won't go into too much of my bio, but I just wanted to share that I like to operate kind of at the intersection of these worlds of marketing, entrepreneurship, education, and that's kind of the lens. I think the lens that we have is very important in how we go about our work and everything from thought leadership to personal branding. So I help organizations and businesses tell their story, help showcase, what makes them unique and build their brand so we can make more impact. I would love to know in the chat if you identify as a founder, as a marketer, or maybe a little bit of both. Maybe you're an entrepreneur, and you own a business, or maybe you're, entre curious. But yeah, founder, marketer, or hybrid. Feel free to drop that in the chat, so I can get a sense of who's here. Awesome. I did assume based on the Grow Class community that there would be a good mix. So thank you for sharing. So obviously, the session's about building community, not just kind of growing, social followers. You'll hear me speak in two different lenses throughout this presentation. So there's the founder side and the marketer side. And of course, we all play a role in building this ecosystem. For founders, you are one of those distribution channels yourself. And obviously for marketers, we know that, if you're working for a company or an organization that has a founder or a leader, your role is to kind of help them to, extract that voice and make it happen. So we'll chat from both perspectives. Why does this matter right now? Obviously, we know that AI is reshaping what discovery looks like, right? When we all know the Google AI summaries that we're seeing, love right? Voice and your matter. That, of course, the cost of ads has, continued to rise and remains elevated. And so audience, does favor credible expertise and conversation. So, all that being said, there's a lot to think about. Um, you know, just because you're online doesn't mean you're going to show up. That's what this little meme is here. Obviously, you're not going to be able to see, your ads anywhere, everywhere, just because you pay for them. And there's a lot more to the story than that. Now, when it comes to thought leadership, some people don't like the word thought leadership or definitely don't want to identify as a thought leader. Um, However, I think takeaways are important here. Social trust is a key factor here, right? More half of consumers say they're more likely to trust brands that are committed to human created content and not specifically, AI or generically produced content. Responsiveness is also one of the most memorable behaviors on social when ranked through Sprout Social study. And that obviously shows us why care, and it gets recall. People are going to remember that responsiveness. Hidden buyers is something to also think about. Who are those people? Those are the decision makers that you don't get to see. They are consuming thought leadership content very regularly, just at the same rates as someone who's actually going to go out in there and actively make a purchase. So it's so important to have those important, those bold ideas. And why do we need community? We know that we need community as humans. I think just to take a moment here before we dive in, that we need community more than ever, right? There's a lot going on in the world. That means community is more important. And I wanted to give a shout out to Growclass for posting this meme a few weeks back. Marketers trying to do their jobs during the fall of man. So there's a lot that's happening in the world from, whether it's the economy, whether it's political conflict, all these things. However, community is important more than ever. Trust is strained. If any of you have heard of the Edelman Trust Barometer, they release this kind of report every year. It's shown for 2025, it's shown deep polarization and declining faith in leaders. People are more likely to trust their employer, they've said in polls, than other institutions. That's why communities anchored by credible voices matter more. When trust in institution is kind of shaky, I think founder-led and employee-led communities can really step in as reliable spaces. So, we want to focus on expert, human, responsive communities. A quick note on audience over community here. So, audience doesn't necessarily mean community. Does everyone agree? If anyone disagrees, let me know, but I see heads nodding. So, an audience consumes whereas a community builds belonging, right? Community participates, it co-creates, it keeps coming back, right? And every piece of content needs an invitation, right? So, you know, letting people respond through comments, reply, join events, etc. And I think thinking about, you'll hear throughout the session, I'll talk about the idea of like hosting different recurring series or group sessions or lives. This is really important to kind of own that idea of participation, right? You want to actually be part of participation. So the new discovery funnel that I want to propose here is, how we kind of see thought leadership in what we could call the AI era. And this presentation is not about AI, by the way. It's not about any AI tools. There's enough of that. So discovery has kind of been rearranged, right? As most of us have experienced. Your audience still searches, of course. We're scrolling, we're still subscribing to things, but we know, you know, what we find or how people find it, and how they come to trust you, that is changing very fast. So this is where kind of community, what I think is not just a nice to have, it's kind of this important insurance or this or a moat around your business. This meme here, um, you know, being impressed by previous days, right? When your website finally ranks on page one for SEO, and every marketer in the company is kind of impressed or swooning over it. That's very difficult today, and in fact, it's more of a feat to be ranked as a high result in a chat bot or a chat tool, right? So as part of the new discovery funnel, I wanted to bring a few different components here. Obviously, search, we just talked about that. Search engines are answering results inside AI summaries. So the top of funnel, you need to use your own thoughts, right? Your own, making sure that your ideas and your original thoughts are somewhere so they can be coming up. For founders, it's not just about kind of ranking and maintaining that. Every post should have kind of a clear invitation, a clear call to action, and encourage other people to share and talk about your brand, because that does help show those platforms that it's a credible source, right? Um, and of course, search is still vital, but we can't depend on it to deliver the relationship. And that's what community loops are for. And I'm going to chat about community loops shortly. The second is social, right? Platforms, especially LinkedIn, are giving more reach to credible expertise and genuine discussions. Some of you may have noticed they changed their algorithm a couple months ago where you'll see older posts at the top, the top of your feed when you open LinkedIn. That's because they want to provide the posts that are going to be the most engaging. They might be super relevant just because they weren't posted, an hour ago. They want you to go deeper. So algorithms are favoring that expertise and genuine discussion. So, it's important to think about this from a founder perspective and from marketer perspective to kind of build this distributed voice strategy where you have different people from your team, from your business, posting and sharing, for example. And direct and owned channels, I would say that, with search and social always fluctuating, the owned channels like your emails, your SMS, other community platforms, um, those are the reliable way to kind of maintain attention. And we'll talk, a little bit about some ideas on that, how you can build community. But you need a home base and a cadence, right? Where you set the rules and kind of choose where to build that depth, because that's where community and belonging is starting to compound over traditional social. All right. So who loves a good framework or a process as a diagram? I think I know enough marketers who do. I created a very basic one here to kind of show all the components to consider, which will apply to the rest of today's session as we dive deeper. Community starts at the core, as I'm saying here. It is not random, right? So when it comes to this is the core. When it comes to community building through thought leadership and founder-led marketing, which is what you're here to talk about today, it helps to start at the core. And what I mean by that are think about values and real lived experiences and brand, right? Your brand value, your brand strategy, your brand position can live here too. So with that in mind, you will develop your signature thinking. What are the frameworks that are unique to your organization, to your leader or your founder or your personal brand, if that's you, right? Typically, this isn't out of just thin air, but it's based on, real subject matter expertise. It's not just stuff you can Google. It's where, your ideas get formalized into thought leadership. I've been parts of different organizations and companies where, the leaders will share the same types of thoughts and processes and ideas regularly in their quarterly meetings, in their one-on-ones, but that's not really captured anywhere. So I want you to think about how you could, really take this signature thinking, whether it's from yourself or whether it's from a leader in your company, and formalize that. What are those unique, frameworks and expertise? With that, you will then move on to step three, which is crafting a content system, right? That's where the core values and experiences from, the first part there, um, and the messaging and your signature thinking actually live. This is where they show up, right? The first circle and the second circle kind of come together in this content system. And they're going to show up there, not just as a standalone piece of content, right? I want you to think about it as a system of various channels in various formats. Not everywhere and anywhere, right? But whatever is, of course, relevant to your industry or where your audience spends their time. So, and then again, if you're using founder-led marketing as a tactic, I would say that, or as a strategy, a big part of your content system will actually be the founder's personal social channels. And perhaps they have their own mailing list as well. We're seeing a lot of founders with their own separate, email list. And then lastly, we move into community loops. That's where you'll add and you'll iterate on your content system based on what the community is saying and asking about, right? So important. If you're fortunate enough to, have a lot of active community members, you'll be able to co-create with your audience as well in this kind of stage here. That could look like repurposing their content, user-generated content, collab posts, highlighting and featuring community members. So this is the kind of framework that I wanted to introduce to you today, starting from the core to your signature thinking, to your content system, and to the community loops. And then, of course, you're going to continue to intertwine these over time. All right. And I think for community to be part of our priority list at any given time, we need to make it into a ritual, right? Something we're thinking about very regularly. Like I said, rituals, not randomness, right? Community is fed by ideas, but it's kept alive by these rituals. And what do I mean by rituals? I'm talking about things like recurring events, recurring prompts, different situations in which it's coming to the forefront. So how can founders do this? I think the first thing is to start by by listing a few of your values and a few formats that make sense for you to put those into, and then one ritual that makes sense for you. I've worked with a lot of very busy founders who some of them are traveling all the time. They can't even, be in their office regularly for a video shoot. But what does that look like? Is it a monthly live session? Is it an AMA with the team? Is it an Instagram live? What is that? What is one ritual so that you can do? And then for marketers, it's about kind of mapping all the people of influence within the brand, executives, could be project managers, could be, whatever it is, customers, and then have one recurring community ritual with them. So when you're working on this weekly, as your team, think about things like, who are we going to spotlight this week, right? Where can people show up live within our business? What's a specific prompt or ask we can put together? Or, what's a conversation that's already happening online that we could turn into a post on its own? And then when is the next ritual set, right? When's the next date, time that we're going to be able to engage with this? So having those rituals really helps to make this whole strategy for community building make sense. Now, there's a few different lenses that you can use when you're approaching community building through thought leadership and founder-led marketing. Three that I've worked with, and I won't go too in depth into these just because of time. But the first one is what I call the brand first approach. I just recently did a talk about that 2 weeks ago with a group called Social Next. So I'm happy to share some of the slides about that or the resources from that. But the brand first approach is something that you can use when, again, your messaging isn't super clear, or perhaps the channels that you're on and your team members are on feel a little bit scattered. And the way you're gonna to test that out is just to ask, does everything we're sharing reinforce our promise, our brand story, our mission, and our proof, right? Each and every post. Um, a small example of how you could do this would be, you know, trying to have your team come together and vet certain statements or questions to say, how would we respond to this as a brand, and kind of find that voice. But a brand first approach is really important. It can apply to anything you do. The second is the ecosystem of you, which is a concept that I came up with and I often speak about when I'm talking to founders or even students about building an ecosystem around their brand and their interests and their passions. That's where the founder or the leader, of course, is going to be central. And you're going to want to run everything through, where does this particular piece of content or this story or this example fit into the ecosystem? And does it show the values of our brand? Does it have a unique point of view from the individual? Is it inviting people to participate? And then is there some kind of ritual, that meaning, can it be recurring? Um, an example of this could be hosting for example, like a monthly or a weekly town hall where, your community is discussing a specific belief or a specific tension that's come up. And lastly, clarity, consistency, community, the three C's. Um, you can use this when you're being consistent, but there's not a lot of activity. There's not a lot of action on your profiles. And I think it's important to kind of test it by, finding ways where you could solicit that engagement a little bit more. Are you asking people to actually create a conversation there, right? Are you making sure that that's super clear? Are you linking from, let's say, your newsletter? Are you telling people to go to your social? From your podcast, are you inviting people to, submit feedback or questions? Where can these links be made? Okay, enough of that initial spiel for you there. I want to move into some examples because there's not one exact way to use thought leadership and founder-led marketing to build your community, as you all know. So I'm highlighting a few here that I've kind of put together from different industries, different perspectives, that they all have their own styles, right? Both as brands and as individuals. But one thing that they have in common is that they're all Canadian, which we love. And of course, the different, some of the platforms that they're using. So first example I'll start with is Joanna Griffiths from Nix. Many of you may know her for having the largest exit from a female founder in Canadian history, which happened, I believe, a couple of years ago now. Now, the reason I'm mentioning her as an example here is because she remains very present as kind of a face or as a voice behind this brand. But Nix, of course, does its own marketing really well. The story I'll share here is that Nix, as a company, they have a blog called The Lift on their website. And their team told the story of their CEO, Joanna's experience giving birth herself, and how they were inspired to launch a project to feature other women's postpartum journeys. So the CEO, Joanna, she was interviewed about her experience and her goals with this project. As a team, they decided to interview her. And, prior to this happening, she actually made, you know, even she had made a bunch of headlines relating to her pregnancy, actually, because she was looking for funding while pregnant. Nix, as a company, raised $53 million in capital. And they took some of their final investments for that round just days before she gave birth to her twins. So this is important because she's kind of, again, owning her story, rallying around, making something that is relatable to some of the audience members in her community. And as you can see by the caption of this kind of photo in the middle here, sharing direct personal quotes, opening up as if it's something you would probably only share with close family and friends, right? Where she's, talking about the experience she had in the hospital and what was going on, not only with her personal health and her family, but also at the same time, they were winning one of the biggest awards in the industry to date at the time. But she opened up about this. And in certain situations, I think that it's also strategic for founders to post some of the brand's content on their own personal profiles. I don't always recommend this. I would say the best time to do this is when the founder is connecting it to their own personal story or their thoughts or their beliefs. And so in this case, this is a video that they recently posted 5 weeks ago. And she's posting it on her own personal social, and she's saying that she's excited, specifically um, going back to her career story, right? Totally different from Nick's. Prior to Nick, she worked at Universal Music, and she got to work on the Pussycat Dolls album. And so she was saying that it was, a really full circle moment, 20 years later, that, a member of this band is actually modeling and being featured in a video. Very powerful. Again, it could be a video of her talking about this. It could just be her posting about it elsewhere. But in this case, she actually posted this brand asset on her personal page. Now, why does all of this work? I think as a founder, and to your point, Julia, it was very intertwined, right? Her narrative helps to normalize what was otherwise at some points considered taboo topics, right? And of course, she had a community form around her experience, right? Around some of the shared experiences. And then, of course, with that postpartum project, she kind of had this offline community and online community where they have galleries and people can actually tell and submit their stories and feature them. Um, and of course, as a founder, even though again she sold the business a couple of years ago, she remained closely connected, and continues to tell their story as they scaled as a company. So, for founders to apply this, I think building some kind of cause aligned artifact. When I use the word artifact, it's something I use, in academics when we're talking about advertising. Uh, is what is that thing, right? Is it a gallery? Is it a book? Is it a mini documentary? What is this kind of cause or mission aligned artifact that invites contribution? So in this case, they started that project where people could submit their stories postpartum, right? And then of course for marketers, there's all kinds of ways that you can run, community or member-led storytelling where you're helping to co-create that chapter with your customers. Okay, another example is Joe Teo from Hey Orca. Hey Orca, if you don't know, is an awesome kind of social media management tool and platform. They do quite a bit. Their marketing is very catered towards social media managers specifically. Um, and they're a B2B SaaS, right? They specifically sell to other brands who are looking to hire. So Joe shares quite a bit on his own social, and he explains he really kind of fosters this community of social media managers because those are his users, his end users of his product, right? And so they put together this virtual summit for social media managers in partnership with Headspace. They're supporting a cause with it, and what they're doing here is they're directly acknowledging that, social media managers, it could be a tough job when you're, dealing with potentially hundreds or thousands of comments or complaints, or, there's a lot of stress that they may face on the front lines there of social and marketing. So they're hosting this virtual summit, and a big portion of it was talking about mental health. Another thing that he does is he's often featured in videos, in person when their team is doing offsites. They're a fully remote team, but they'll do offsites, or when they host events and conferences, they bring the community together and they really choose to feature their team members in their community. So this on the right is a picture of a conference they did here in Toronto. I was actually a speaker at this conference. It was a community summit all about community building. So they say the future of marketing is community. But we get to see kind of the behind the scenes of what it was like to set up. And they did a funny kind of trend where the whole team was shown to be doing the work, and every time they asked him, he was just like, "I'm Joe." And then they get everyone to introduce themselves and what they're actually doing. So just a way to kind of build that community and show up and be immersed here. I think it's really important that he's leading and building this community around the profession. And again, the founder and the brand are both posting in tandem. I think that really helps to amplify what they're doing. The ritual, right, that I talked about, the ritual that they have is these in-person events, which are summits. They're bringing their community together, right? And the community identity, you could say, is that they care about social media managers instead of just we sell software, right? Or we have the tool. So I think that's an important differentiator in how you can position yourself. And SaaS companies often, uh, traditionally have had very impersonal marketing, not super focused on the community side of things. Kayla mentioned that 1Password, one of the founders had a newsletter, which is awesome. It's great that kind of the founder was able to maintain their own voice, their own newsletter. I think that's a great way to go around this, to go about this, sorry. One thing I'll say, this one's a little bit meta, is that Joe also shared his thoughts about community building. As a tech and a social founder, he's not afraid to comment on what others in tech and social are doing either. And so he says here, Sora can create anything, but it can't create belonging. That's the difference between content and connection, between creation and community. AI shows us what's possible. Community reminds us what's meaningful. And then he says community is the antidote to Sora. So whether or not you agree or disagree with that statement, I think that this everything that he said in here is very strong, very powerful, and very relevant, regardless of what industry you're in. And if you're a leader that loves your community, you can always come right out and say it, right? He randomly did a post a couple weeks ago saying, "I love our community. That's all I want to say." So feel free to kind of own that. Another example here is a company called Fable. They're a tech company. They're the only accessibility platform out there that's powered by people with disabilities. So when Fable raised their Series A funding a couple years ago, I had a chance to support them directly on that with the announcement. I was a fractional marketing lead for them at the time. And on the company's website, the announcement came out as, from the CEO, and they made it about, Fable's next chapter. Why did they do this? They really consulted with their team and with their community first. They didn't want their community members to feel like they were just a product or like a secondary thing. And now that they have this funding, they're gonna, change how they work. No. So one of the things we did was we included an in-depth founder Q&A video. I think it was like 10 or 11 minutes long about this announcement, this funding announcement, to ensure that the community was connected to it as a good news story, right? And what the 10 million US dollar raise meant for Fable as a whole and as a community. Now, community is extremely important to Fable, right? They are a community of people with disabilities. That's who powers their company. And so they built a community of assisted technology users, and they made it easy for their customers to engage with them. I think this is a really great example. Alwar, of course, thanked her community as part of the funding announcement as well. So this works because community is inside the product, right? Though they're embedded within that, they're co-creators. And the founder voice helps to kind of narrate that change and keeps everyone aligned and transparent about the process. So for founders, the takeaway here is you can kind of build some kind of member or contributor layer, whether they're advisors, whether they're testers, whatever that looks like, and make them feel like they really are that trusted source. And for marketers, you can kind of elevate the expertise of and showcase those members through case studies and shared terms and involvement. Okay, and then we have Karen from Bloom. Does anyone know Bloom, or have you tried Bloom? Okay, Hannah has. Awesome. Um, they are really great at kind of sharing these real reactions and feelings of the founder on LinkedIn. So Karen is the co-founder and the CEO, and everything is basically under the theme of entrepreneurship and wellness, right? And what I love about this is that it connects the company's mission of building a quote unquote kinder wellness world. With herself, initially, she didn't feel represented. She felt that the world was all about either athletes or very diet driven supplements. So her community is very much aligned And beyond her kind of B2B and D2C customers, she also has a community of retailers. And so in this post on the screenshot I have here, she's actually shouting out a few of those retailers who carry Bloom products, and talking about how her community sends her photos of the retail displays. So they really feel like they're part of this journey and part of this growth of the brand. Now, this one here, you can see by this photo on the left, it's not a formal staged photo shoot. It's taken on her phone by her husband. I cropped it a little. It was even more wonky. And, instead of a simply reading, right, a press release, Blue is now in Walmart. She told the story of her and her husband driving to Walmart and seeing their latest product on the shelves, which she said was surreal. So she connects it back to her goal, which is all about community, right? And she says that bringing new people to the category and reaching women with a new, kinder wellness ritual is what was important. So, Karen shares her learnings and tips as thought leadership along the way. And her founder-led marketing approach really extends to Instagram, where some of the posts of the brand coming from Bloom actually appear in first person, coming from her. I think I included a couple of, screenshots where they're just taking this personal founder-led approach, given, even though it's through the company page. So this is a post that was, posted by the company, and there's kind of a swipe series of her explaining why this Super Belly product almost was a flop. And frequently goes back to sharing the journey. So for example, they're showing her, but again, this is posted on the company page. So how it started, her graduation, how it's going. Then we have this example, how it started, the original kind of small packaging that she was doing at home in her condo, and how it's going. They have like a professional assembly plant here, manufacturing facility. How it's going, sorry, how it started, pitching on Dragon's Den, how it's going, being listed at Whole Foods. So there's a lot of examples here where, again, the community feels like they are part of the story. We're on a journey with Karen. If we're following Bloom, right, we're on a journey with her. So I think that's really important. Um, and again, even from a team perspective, how it started, one team member, and then she's got a whole team here. So great example. If anyone, yes, Julia mentions the authenticity here for sure. And there's a lot of raw moments and videos that, of course, I don't want to, take up time sharing during the presentation. All right. So I want to talk next about how you can kind of turn all of these stories and this lived experience and expertise into community assets, right? Things that help build the community. So we all know that for this to work, we're going to need a lot of stories and experiences to share, right? And I think for it to be practical and have your teams aligned, it's helpful to have a format and basic questions to ask. I ran an agency for about 11 years. I've been a brand strategist and, doing a lot of content strategy. We need to turn to our communities to actually extract these stories and get these insights, right? So I put together this list of just how to turn lived experience into community assets by, again, asking your team, your clients, your leaders, anyone who makes sense in your situation. So this is kind of a 6-step process here. So the story, obviously, you're going to want to ask what happened, what was the context, the decision, the outcome. Lesson, what changed you? Just a quick, sentence of what happened. The invite, what is their version? So again, what are they as in the person posting this, right? What's one thing that they're inviting people to do? Is it join them? Is it subscribe? Is it build this movement? Is it buy something? The spotlight, where was there a comment or a share with something useful, right? Additional insights being added. The artifact, what's the keeper? What's the takeaway? Is it a download? Is it a checklist? Is it a guide? Is it a course? What is this like thing we get to keep and take away? And then finally, the loop. Where do we discuss it? And when we discuss that, again, it continues that loop where now there's more stories because of this thing being shared, right? So every story essentially can be seen as a prompt and something that you keep. And that's how personal experience can kind of, become more of a community asset, community value. So how do we amplify our efforts? All this talk about kind of community building. Um, so I put together this looks like a little bit of a complex thing, but just because there's a lot of circles here, I wanted to talk about, how you can essentially amplify with activation loops, as I mentioned earlier. So you want to design content that creates these rooms, these communities, these experiences, instead of just, filling people's feeds as a one-off. And we start, of course, with posting something, right? A clear point of view on your industry or your product, and encourage that community engagement. That can be turned into a series, which you want to be able to do on different channels by linking them together, whether it's through, the different features on certain platforms that allow you to do a series, or whether you're just naming it or using a hashtag to classify that as part of a series. Then you're going to want to have some kind of live touch point, right? I mentioned before, can you host a local meetup, an online Ask Me Anything session, where people can kind of gather and discuss their input? And then, or sorry, you're going to get their input, and then post by your community, right? Can you encourage people to share their experience, or can you feature customers, community members, team members, and kind of encourage them to reply and share those experiences? And then that spotlight, right? How are you going to now take stuff that people have shared and commented or submitted and turn that into, real focused content? Maybe you then, maybe they submitted a casual blurb or feedback, but then you actually go commission a videographer to go, film them in their real life. Or, maybe you're going to have one of your team members do an in-depth story for your newsletter. What can you do to really spotlight? And then, of course, that goes right into the next post where you'll summarize all those key takeaways, content, highlights, and and start the cycle again, right? Where you're going to have include another topic in the next post. So this is kind of a little what I call an activation loop here. And I actually apply a version of this loop with my business, the Good Growth Company. So the Good Growth Company is my training company for nonprofits. And what I do is I post organic videos, blogs, and newsletters. I go from there to hosting weekly live sessions on Zoom. And then I share the community feedback from that. People submit quotes, and I have session recaps that I put on the blog. I have clips on social media, and all of those things then promote the next session, right? So it goes from, posting organic content to get people to subscribe to the newsletter, to inviting them to a live session, sharing their feedback and comments and takeaways on social, which then promotes the next session and continues the loop. So there's different ways you can adjust it to your business, obviously. But if you're on LinkedIn, I think that platform really favors that expertise and that engagement, and it measures dwell time and comments, right? How long people are spending, instead of just shallow reach, like just a quick scroll through. So lean into that, those ongoing formats and conversations that you can have. All right, a couple people have to drop off. So again, expertise plus engagement is far better than generic reach, right? When it comes to these activation loops. I already mentioned that LinkedIn kind of favors that. Okay, I'm actually going to just skip through this here. Something important for all of us here is to focus on balance over burnout, right? I think that's really important for all of us. We're not here to burn out. We want to find a cadence that actually works for you. I like to tell my clients that the goal is a cadence that you can keep even during a busy week, right? Make that the plan, because I know sometimes our weeks all blow up, or I have a bunch of conferences or random things or deadlines. If one of the steps in your process doesn't actually make that possible, then it's probably something you could consider revising. So what does a sustainable cadence look like? I would say a minimum effective system, you could call it, could be something like pick two formats maximum to sustain, for example, LinkedIn and a newsletter, right? Have one ritual per month. For example, like it could take you half an hour. I mentioned before at Ask Me Anything, a show and tell, a live event, whatever that ends up looking like. What is that ritual that you can do once a month? And then what is your rule for replies? How can you commit to, for example, responding within 24 hours to the top comments and then taking some of those comment threads and being able to leverage them in your future posts? What is your spotlight quota? So let's say you want to highlight one person a week or one client a month or whatever that looks like, commit to that number. And then, of course, the batching process of maybe taking an hour or hour and a half a week to outline a few posts and new prompts that kind of, again, encourage your audience to continue to participate, your community to continue to participate. And then, of course, what's something that you're going to stop doing for this to all make sense, which is, sometimes there's these one-off posts that someone wants to put out or someone encourages you to share that doesn't necessarily feed your loop, your overall strategy. So try to phase those things out so that everything kind of supports everything else you're doing. For founders, I think it's great to kind of adopt some kind of, weekly thing you're going to commit to. And for marketers, again, rotate, right? Rotate the different subject matter experts that you're picking from on your team and in your company. Sometimes you might have to give them a script, give them a prompt. Don't ask them to start blank when they're creating this content, but definitely something that you can do to rotate them if people are overwhelmed and you want to balance that burnout and capacity with your team. The last thing we'll go through is measurement before I share a little bit of a recap. Of course, how do you actually assess the effectiveness of your community building efforts here? The first one is what I call idea reach and recognition. So are people actually remembering the point of view? Are they remembering this new thought? Participation and depth. Are people engaging meaningfully? Are they just commenting or clicking like? It's a good sign when someone replies to an email newsletter, for example. That's how you really know that it was effective. It's rare, but it happens. I'm sure Hannah gets a bunch of responses to some of the newsletters that Growclass puts out. Community health. Are we actually building belonging that lasts? That people feel like they're part of the community? Are they staying active? And then program execution, is that activation loop running that we spoke about earlier? And finally, what are the business outcomes of this? Does it move the business forward, right? Does it help us with our sales, our signups, whatever it is that we're trying to do? So a few top level things for measurement. I won't go into this now, but again, consumers, there's a lot of things you can, whether you're B2B or B2C, there's a lot of things you could look at here. I put a bunch of examples, but I challenge you to go beyond the vanity metrics. And if it doesn't move, conversions or shares or invites or retention, it's probably, not as important to commit to. I'm a huge advocate for larger brand building efforts by all means. Just it's important to be able to justify, what we're up to here. And I think that consumers report more. Some of the stats show that consumers report more interactions with brands on social when they invest in their community building efforts, and they find responsiveness to be most memorable. When a brand or a thought leader responds in a timely manner, they actually find that consumers and customers that really sticks and resonates with them. There's a bunch of stuff on the screen here for examples of measurement, kind of setting up some kind of dashboard for you to document that. So a summary as we head into Q&A, if there's time, 5 core truths my 5 core truths, at least, about community building through thought leadership. The first is that voice beats noise. That means, expertise and conversation outruns whatever volatility that's happening in the algorithm. 2, community is the outcome, right? Remember, followers consume, communities choose to co-create and stay. Number 3, rituals create belonging. I talked a lot about different rituals that you could use. That really helps, and it's more important. Cadence, by the way, for rituals, cadence is more important sometimes than intensity, so that people can get familiar and expect that. Number 4, loops compound, right? Going from a post to a series to a live to a member post to a spotlight to your next post, all those examples I shared, they compound and give you more momentum. Number five, depth, I think is an important KPI to focus on. So measuring conversations, participation, invitations, not just reach. So of course, regardless of what changes with technology and tools and platforms, these are kind of some of the rails you can look through. As we wrap up, a reminder that we grow as we go. Consistency, experimentation, and time, in all of my experiences, help with everything that we covered today. So think small, repeatable wins. That's how communities form. And more importantly, that's how they last. Thank you. All right. So now we can jump into questions. Uh,
Mm.
I appreciate the virtual silent claps. I saw a couple people on video clapping, which I love. Thank you so much. So I think, Hannah, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. That was awesome. Appreciate all the tips that you shared with us here today. Friends, feel free to come off mute, drop your questions in chat. We do have one from Julia. Julia's wondering, I'm curious about your take on maintaining ritual cadence when your thought leadership sits at the intersection of personal and organizational voices. I publish for a company as part of my consulting role, but I also want, to build my own presence. How can I maintain that tension without confusing the audience or diluting either brand?
Yeah, I think that's very important. As I mentioned, that it is great if you have, other voices within the organization for sure. As a consultant, you're the person with those unique point of views. Like people want to turn to you for those. It's not as kind of generic. I think that the audience won't be confused if there's a lot of overlap and consistency in the subject matter, right? So if you are kind of working in the same industry,
Yeah,
um, yeah, I think that's a really important piece. Is um, it's not so much, remember, when you're building community, it's not so much the exact, brand messaging. It's more so that you're seen as providing value and you're seen as being kind of a go-to voice that people can turn to along the way. That's what's more important than like exact brand messaging. Now, you're asking about the ritual cadence. I think um, do the do the most with the least amount of commitment. Meaning, can I commit to once a month instead of once a week or twice a week? And will that still be something that is, often enough where my community will actually remember and come back to expect that? If it's the one thing you're doing on your personal presence, let's say once a month you do kind of a recap or a blog post or, a newsletter or whatever it is, people, it will take them a lot longer to realize this is, your cadence, right? This is a ritual that Julie is doing. But if you started a LinkedIn newsletter and posted a quick recap once a week, the time for people to actually start to resonate with that and recognize that, like, I'm part of Julia's community. She's sharing these resources weekly. Um, they're going to discover that a lot sooner, right? And in terms of like diluting the other brand, I think that it's so important to have a mix. And I'm a big advocate of kind of my newsletter, as you can see by the screenshot, it's called The Intersection. The reason it's that is, as I explained at the beginning, I work at the intersection of all these different worlds, but what's common is me. And same with you. You are that common element between different roles, interests, jobs, projects, clients that you work on. So your lens is what's that consistency piece. I don't think that will confuse your audience. So hopefully that helps.
Awesome. Thank you. Daniel,
yes, thank you.
I know you have a hard stop, so just want to check in with you.
Yes, I can
Um,
answer the last. I can answer one more question, I think.
awesome. So we do have one in the chat from Christine. Can you give examples of rituals for service-based businesses?
Yes, absolutely. Similar to Julia, right? Where it's consulting, it's service based. I think one of those important ones could be some type of online session that you're hosting, or in person. For my business of, consulting and training with nonprofits, that is what we do. I have a series. You can brand it, you can name it, right? Back in the day, I used to run a co-working space as part of my agency. We had something called Training Tuesday. 6 o'clock every Tuesday. We had a speaker. We had people come through. We had snacks. Um, for service-based businesses, that's what we did. For Good Growth, which is a service-based business, every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, for example, or Monday, sorry, every Monday at 2 o'clock, we host a live session. Half an hour is presentation from a guest expert. Half an hour is Q&A from the audience. So people know that is part of our ritual. They know that they can come, they can tune in at that time. So hopefully that starts. I do have to jump off, but feel free to connect with me. The QR code again leads to my newsletter, and I think Hannah posted some of my information right there. But thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. I wish I had more of a chance to meet each of you, but thanks for sticking around.
Thank you, Daniel. All of his links are in the chat, so you can connect with him there. Appreciate you all showing up today. We'll be sending out the replay email shortly. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thanks again, Daniel.
Take
Take it
care.
easy.
Thank you.